Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host, and a child of an all-powerful and perfectly loving God, and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. Rico 12 is an open to all addictions and afflictions organization dedicated to exploring the common threads of the differing manifestations of alcoholism, sharing tools and offering hope from those walking a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and locations to learn and support one another. Our speakers come from various fellowships and experiences demonstrating the universal principles of recovery. Rico 12 is not allied or affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. This is Rico 12 speaker meeting number 392. Thank you for joining us live or on the recording later. Today's speaker is Greg T., and we're excited to have him here today. His talk today will be on step 3, and I look forward to hearing more about this message here in a few minutes. But first, a few quick items of business. Rico 12 does offer a variety of recovery resources, including other podcasts and social media communities. To explore more, you can either visit us at rico12.com, that's RECO12.com, or you can check out the chat here in this live meeting. I'll put it in the show notes of the podcast so you can get those links to those different things. Also, just as a word of announcement, the Afro-Euro Rico 12 meeting, which is held and recorded each Friday at 8 a.m. UK time, has a new host. We're so grateful to Karen A., who hosted for the last couple of years. She's built something very, very good. And she had to step away for family and personal reasons that needed to be addressed. Lisa S. is the new host and held her very first meeting as host this morning. And that recording will post on the Rico 12 Speaker Meeting podcast next Wednesday and every Wednesday moving forward. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help keep us continuing in this mission. Thank you to all our Spearhead donors, past and present. This last week, a special thanks goes to Katharina for her contribution to Rico 12. The information on how to do that will be in the chat and in the show notes. Your support, not only financially, but also with your word of mouth, share it with your recovery networks, really makes a difference in helping us share these messages of hope and recovery. Each week, we receive light and inspiration from our speakers. Their experience brings hope, meaning, worth, and growth to us as listeners. Now I'm going to welcome today's guest speaker, Greg T., and here's just a little bit about him. Greg T. is a longtime addict in recovery. He just got 8 years on November 8th of this year. That's awesome. And he coaches basketball and is a longtime teacher. His life has been a long and strange trip, and I'm excited to hear more about it. Take it away, Greg. The floor is yours.
Hey, I'm Greg T., and I'm an alcoholic and an addict, and can you hear me good? Okay, Justin? All right, good. This is a real honor. I love this podcast. I love what Justin does, and with this every week, I've listened to so many of these speakers and gotten so much out of it over the years, and just a real honor to be asked to do this and just to share my story. I grew up in Montana. Parents were teachers, coaches, and grew up in a family where my parents were, I may or may not have been born with this disease. I don't know, but I had parents that were very hardworking, very career oriented, and somehow, some way in my childhood, I just kind of got lost in the shuffle, and somehow developed kind of a core belief that I just was not very important, not very lovable, not very interesting, and my parents were great and all this stuff, but I just, I was, just not. I just wasn't, I wasn't a lovable person. And I think that was a core belief that I developed at a very, very young age. And, as I got into junior high and high school, drugs and alcohol became, sex, drugs, and alcohol, attention from women, attention from females, and then drugs and alcohol became the thing that just seemed to take it all away. the pain of living, the pain of feeling that way was so great that, somehow, some way, when I got into substances, it it just went it would go away. And so I have a long, bad history with abusing drugs and alcohol that went all the way from high school to college, into my young adult years as a trying to be a teacher and a coach, and it just, progressively got worse and worse and worse. Uh, in 2008, I think I was about 31 years old. I was a head coach at a high school and a teacher, and I had gotten a new job at a public school. I had been at this Catholic high school for years, and I had all these friends and all this uh, love and closeness and the church and all these wonderful things. And I was really in this kind of wonderful little environment. But I got this great opportunity to get this new job. There was a lot of pressure. It was a big job, and it was a lot of stress. And I was not in recovery yet. And a really interesting thing, well, the thing that happened was, what was interesting that kind of got me into recovery was my sister had developed some issues with body issues and food, and she went to a recovery place in Arizona. In fact, I'm sure Justin's heard of it. It's a place in Wickenburg, Arizona. You've ever been to Wickenburg? There's not much in Wickenburg, but there's like 5 rehab centers and a really, really good German restaurant. It's just so weird. You're in the middle of the desert, and it's this amazing retired German family that started a restaurant, the most amazing German food. So anyway, we went down there for a family week, and I learned about our family history and addiction. And I mean, I at the time was a full-fledged addict, for sure. And that really planted the seed that, wow, I have all of these same issues. I grew up in the same family. I have the same problems. I have the same, they really did an amazing job of teaching us, kind of the history and what happens and how someone becomes an alcoholic or an addict, and what the makeup is. And uh, so that really planted the seed. So about a year later, uh, I'm in this high pressure job. It's really, in my mind, not going great. It's really hard. It's really stressful. And I don't have the love and friends and the church around me now. And I felt like I was completely on my own. I had a wife at the time that was putting a lot of pressure for me to make money, didn't want me to have any, like, she was nervous about, a lot of financial insecurity. So me having problems wasn't really okay. I had to kind of have it all together because my job was to provide for the family and, be Superman, basically. And I wasn't Superman. I was far from it. I was a guy with a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And I had about 2 or 3 nights in a row where I had too much to drink, and I got into some pills and some other things, and I just couldn't stop. And I had kind of been hiding it for a long time, but now I couldn't, my wife was on to me, and she wasn't okay with what I was doing. And I knew something was wrong with me, you know, I, I knew that I had something wrong. And so I had come across a guy who did addiction counseling, and I called him up, and this was on like July 4th, you know, and he said, "Why don't you come and see me today?" And I went to this guy's office, and I had a 2-hour meeting with this counselor where he kind of told me all about addiction and how it all worked. And he had a program that he could kind of a men's group to get you in. And his basic remedy was to start getting you into meetings and getting into a recovery group. And I walked out of there, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I at least had a diagnosis of what was wrong. Where before I had always felt like something's really wrong with me, and I think I'm the only person on the planet that feels like this. I think everybody else is just totally fine and normal, and I'm not, and I'm just different. I'm like from another planet. And now I realized that, okay, I see what's going on. You know, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, I got all these issues from my childhood. You know, I have a lot of trauma, I had tons of trauma in my life, uh, abandonment issues, and, you know, all kinds of things that happened. And, you know, I was a mess. And he recommended that I go to a meeting. And so the first meeting I went to, I think this was like on a Friday, was a Sunday. There was a Sunday evening meeting. I lived in Seattle. It was on Capitol Hill. And I was so scared, but I went. And my wife wasn't real big on me doing this because she was nervous about what this might mean. You know, what kind of change this might create. And you know, so that's another piece of my story is what happens when you get into recovery and your life really starts to change. Well, I went to this meeting, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I was in this room, there was laughter, people were laughing, people were actually joking about the crazy stuff they had done. They could laugh at themselves. They were talking about things that had I done, I would have taken to my deathbed. I would never have admitted some of these things, but I wasn't in recovery yet. You know, I wasn't. And I just didn't, I couldn't believe it. But there was such a freedom and a happiness that these people had. And I was just hooked. I was hooked right then from, you know, the 12-step recovery was the thing for me, you know. And this was an NA meeting, and it was great. And then I got into some AA meetings, and I also went to some SA meetings because I was having some issues in that area too. And uh, I had all kinds of problems. Uh, I had all kinds of issues going on. I mean, anything really that was a mind or mood altering experience, I was addicted to. I became addicted to. So, uh, sex, drugs, alcohol, you name it. And really, my drug of choice was more, and preferably yours, because I didn't want to share. So that was kind of my creed. And so I got it that my life really started to change dramatically. I got into a recovery group with a bunch of men. You know, there was like 8 or 9 guys that were all just like me. Their lives had blown up. They had come to this counselor. We started a group. Wrote, you know, we became close. We became good friends. I'm still friends. That was 2008. We're still friends with. I'm still really close with a lot of these guys. Started going to meetings. Uh, wasn't very long after that. It was really recommended to me to go to treatment because I was really needing treatment. I went to a place went to Wickenburg, Arizona, went to a treatment center for 25 days. They thought I was so advanced and so wonderful that they wanted me to stay for another 30 days because they liked me so much, you know, and I was such you know, such a valuable part of the treatment center, I thought. Truly, I was just really, really, really sick. I'm joking, of course. So, but I just couldn't do that. I took some time off from work to go do this, and I I did 25 days. And once I got out of that, I now had this awareness of all these issues, you know, dealing with all these childhood issues, all these abandonment issues, all this, I'm not lovable. And uh, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. If I ask for my needs to be met, if I'm a burden at all to you and I love you, you'll go away. I mean, I just had all these really crazy, sick core issues that I wasn't really aware of. You know, I had no idea. I had no clue. And but now that I knew about this stuff, uh, really had a hard time staying sober because now I was like ripped open, and I was out of the treatment center, and I'm out in the mean world. You know, I'm teaching and coaching and dealing with this and dealing with my wife who's not at all interested or supportive about recovery, and really just wanted everything to go back to the way it was before I got in recovery without the drugs and the alcohol and all the other stuff. Well, I couldn't do that. The only way I could do this now was to be very involved in recovery and try to build a new life. So we had a lot of tension. There was a lot of tension at home. Um, Going to meetings was an issue. Being gone to go to a weekend retreat was going to be a big issue. You know, just all kind of taking phone calls from newcomers was going to be an issue. You know, your whole life does kind of change, really. You know, if you're really sick like me and you really got to get involved in this, your life really changes. And some people can like it and are supportive. And there's some people in your life that are going to be like, we don't like all this stuff. We like the old guy, you know, that just kind of went with the program and was drunk and stoned all the time. You know, there are some people in my life that like the old guy better. Um, and so here I was, and now I'm really trying, but I'm a mess, and I'm just kind of like bleeding. You know, I'm just like I got all these issues that are coming out sideways, and um, uh, I'm just a mess. And in a lot of ways, I'm worse than I was before because I'm sober, but I'm kind of a mess. And I'd relapse every couple of weeks, or I'd have a slip up, or I'd have this, or I'd have that, and um, so I decided that another round of rehab would be very. I didn't decide; it was really recommended, and I was convinced. And I wasn't going to go to rehab again. I was like, I can't do it. I've already spent all this money. I can't do. And my sponsor and a couple other guys met me for breakfast after a meeting, and they were they convinced me. You know, I had enough people around me who cared about me that really convinced me. So I went to a place in Pennsylvania for a whole summer, and that did not go over well at home, by the way, because I was a teacher, and you know, teachers live for summer. If you're especially if you're married and you have little kids, like summer's the best. You know, you're going to go on vacation, you're going to hang out, you're together all the time, barbecues and swimming pools and all that stuff. Well, school got out, I think like first week of June, and I was on an airplane to Philadelphia, and I spent 45 days in a treatment center in Pennsylvania, and it was a really good place. It was a no nonsense place where if you're really serious, this was a good place to go. uh, they lovingly called it the House of Pain, but it was a place where you were going to really face yourself and do a lot of work on yourself and come out. It was the greatest thing I ever did. So I get out of there, uh, you know, and right away my life as I get out starts falling apart. My marriage starts falling apart. My job, I had a really toxic job, and that started to fall apart. Um, there were a lot of things that I could do when I was sick. I could kind of put up and tolerate with a lot of bad, toxic things, and now I had a hard time with it. Now I'm like, I'm trying to love myself now, and it's hard to love myself when I have like bad treatment and someone treating me bad and someone treating me like a piece of garbage. And uh, so they just didn't go together now. So uh, shortly thereafter, my marriage is totally falling apart. We decided to split up, and I decide that I'm not really an alcoholic, you know, and I'm just going to drink a little bit. I meet a wonderful woman who liked to drink, who's a wonderful woman, and we met at a teachers conference, and it was like the most uh, wonderful romance. Uh, wonderful time, and we're having a great time, and we're doing all these wonderful things together, and I'm in love, uh, and it doesn't happen right away, but little by little, the alcoholism started to come back, and now I'm drinking more and more and more. And instead of having a couple of glasses of wine, I'm having a lot of wine and then some hard alcohol. And now I'm getting back into some pills, a little bit of this and that. And um, I was Mr. Wonderful. I've kind of gone from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde with this woman. And she loves me, but she's done a lot of work herself. She's had done a lot of work in ACA and a lot of counseling, and she'd had a bad husband before and had a bad boyfriend before, and she was pretty healthy, and she loved me, and she was going to kick me out, no doubt about it. She loved me, but she had boundaries, and she was going to kick me out of there. And I woke up on November 8th of 2017, and I had too much to drink the night before. I was getting up. I was, going to do my regular routine of getting ready to go to school, and I could see in my with the time we were dating, her face, that the love was gone. Like I was about to get fired. If you ever know that feeling, I think as alcoholics and addicts, we kind of know when we're about to get fired. We're pushing it, and we're kind of at that point. And that's where I was. And so I called my old sponsor, who wasn't sponsoring anybody, but he told me this other guy that I knew from his days when he wasn't sober, who was now sober and doing great, would be a good sponsor for me. And his name was Bobby. And Bobby he was really crazy when I knew him. I mean, he was really out there crazy. And I thought he would really be a good sponsor because I knew how crazy he was, and there was nothing I was going to tell him that was going to shock him. And he was like, had really been down, I mean, he had really been down, rock bottom, and was just doing so well. And I called him, and we started. He said he'd be my sponsor, and we met. He had a nice house, and he had a camper out in front of his house. And we would go into his camper, we'd turn on the little heater, and we would just go through the book, and we would do step work, and we would do writing. And so this was really my step 3. The name of this topic is step 3, turning my will and my life over. And I had tried many, many times to do step 3, but I always had a hard time with connecting to a higher power. I had a very hard time. I believed in God. I grew up in Catholic schools. I loved everything about it. I loved going to church, but I just didn't believe that there was a God that cared about me or that knew that I even existed, you know? I believe that there was a God, but I didn't think that God really, I was just so insignificant and I didn't matter. And, that all went back to my childhood issues. So my step 3 really was my sponsor, was me turning my will and my life over to my sponsor and me saying, Bobby, I'm going to do whatever you tell me. I'm going to follow your advice. And I did. And I didn't like following advice. The very first thing I did, he told me to do, he says, well, you got to move out of your house. You got to get away from your girlfriend and you need to get your own place where you can just do recovery for like a year. And I sure did not want to do that because I love we're married now. I love my girlfriend. I loved her so much and loved being around her and loved everything about her and loved being home. But I would find things to get in the way of recovery. That was just, that was another addiction. That was a love addiction, really. And so I did it. I went and rented a little room from this lady who had rented out rooms. She had a house and she would rent rooms. And that's what I did for a year. I lived in this room. We had a shared kitchen, shared bathroom. And my life was, I got up in the morning, I went to a meeting, I went to school, I taught all day. When school got out, I hung out with my kids. I have two daughters at the time. One was middle school, one was high school. We hung out, and then, not every day, but whenever I could, usually 2 days a week at least. And then I went to meetings. I chaired a meeting. I went home.
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
And I did it again. And that's what I did for a good year. And that's how I got a year sober again. I don't know how much time I have left, Justin. 2 minutes? 3 minutes. Okay. And that was my introduction, really. And that was the thing. And then I just want to share this one last story before I go. During that year, I was still kind of shaky. And I went to a meeting. I went to meetings every day. And there was a meeting at noon in Seattle I went to. It was really good. And there's a lady that knew me who knew I was kind of shaky. And she said, I want you to talk to this guy. And he was this old dude who had been around forever. He had like 50 plus years sober and whatever. And he wasn't Mr. Happy either. He was kind of doom and gloom, kind of grumpy, frumpy and grumpy. And he sat me down, and he had seen me coming in and out for years. I think he was waiting for me. And he said, Greg, if you want to do this, you've got to live in AA and visit the world. You can't live in the world and visit AA or recovery or whatever you want to call it. And I had always been doing it that way. I'd always been out living, doing my thing. And then, when life got tough, I came back. He said, you're going to die drunk and stoned and who knows what else that way. This has got to be number one. This is your life. This is where you live. And then you go out there and visit. And I've had to learn the hard way that really is the way to live. And I've had to go through some real hard times financially and all kinds of things. But what's number one is being safe and serene and sober is number one, and just doing the best I can in life, because that if I don't do it that way, I'll screw it up. And that's all I got.
Greg, thank you so much. And I love that closing story and that closing statement. I have to live in AA, in recovery, and visit the world, not live in the world and visit recovery, once or twice a week when I go into meetings. I love that thought and that idea. In fact, what I'd like to do is after I invite our live audience here, if you have a question for Greg, please type it in the chat. If you want to remain anonymous and me not read your first name, send me a direct message in the chat and I'll get to those questions as we go along. But man, I want to talk a little bit about this and sit on that. Greg, what are some examples of how you try to live in AA and just visit the world rather than living in the world where there's all sorts of distractions and everything and just visiting AA?
Well, I think it's a combination of what becomes kind of just a daily habit and routine for how I live. And if I don't do that, I feel really off and just kind of miserable, So morning prayer, doing something in the morning that's recovery based, whether it's prayer or my little checklist on, how I did the day before on things that are kind of like a 10th step checklist. Meditating. And then, I just live in this. Like I listen to podcasts. I listen to the podcasts. I go to meetings. I talk to 2 or 3 people a day, probably, who are in recovery. I just never go very far from recovery. And, 3 years ago, we moved from Seattle to Central Washington. So that was a really big challenge because I had all these wonderful friends and I had a home group and all these wonderful meetings and all these connections. And I had to make new ones, because you now are living in a new place. And I still talk to all those people back in Seattle all the time, but it's not the same as going to the meeting and seeing them. It's not the same. So you got to, wherever you go, then you got to go do it again. And that's hard. It's hard, for people like me to go and now make new friends and meet new people. But it's either do that or I'm in plan B. And plan B just doesn't work. Plan B is kind of sort of doing recovery and kind of sort of. So, and then, life has gotten hard at times to show like all of those wonderful things I had kind of went away. Anything I was attached to, money, nice stuff like that. And I really got a chance to appreciate what's really important.
Yeah, I love how you're focusing on those things and talking about putting, your recovery first and everything. You mentioned earlier in your talk that, sometimes, and this seemed to be your experience, you get sober, but, those character defects, things got worse. And something that I have said or heard said is, living in abstinence, that white knuckle abstinence is hell. To me, it's worse than living in active addiction. Now, is that the truth or not? I don't know, but it's hell. Talk to me a little bit about how you move through those times in your life, which I'm assuming you still have from time to time, where you're just like, some days I'm just hanging on to sobriety for dear life today. And tomorrow, hopefully things will be a little bit more recovery based. How do you get through those moments?
That's a great question. And I think it's something that we don't talk about probably enough. And it's something that everybody deals with. I mean, I think we've all had the experience if we're in recovery, where we moved to Whidbey Island at one point, and there was a really good, and that's really kind of where I got sober, was on Whidbey Island. And there was this AA meeting, and there was this guy who was this real guru of the meeting. He had like 30 plus years sober, and he was kind of gruff. And when the meeting was over, there's this 2-lane road driving out of there to get to the main road. And there's not really a turn lane, but there's kind of a turn. It's not really marked. And this guy was ahead of me. He didn't know it was me. And he saw it. He just was going to try to go right, but he got over there late. And he just cut me off and flipped me off and didn't know who I was. I was like, wow, we all struggle with this stuff still, and I just didn't ever want to be the guy who had like 30 plus years, but I was miserable and angry. And so I'll never consider myself like a recovered person. I'm still just day at a time. I have good and bad days. I try to stay in touch with people because I need help. I'm always going to need help. I'm doing the very best I can, and I have good and bad days.
Hey Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And I think often we all have very good, bad days, and it's important to address those things. And I love the story that you said there to do that. Next question is from an anonymous person who posted in our chat here, and I'm going to post it in the chat so you can read along with me if you choose, but I'll read this to you. This person says, "What a great share. I relate a lot. Thank you for your service." Now, here's a couple of questions in the next paragraph. You spoke about all your trauma. Has the program helped you heal all of that? I find, like you, now I'm aware of the trauma and cut wide open. There are these things I'm using, and avoidance, disassociating is the main thing I use right now. How do you manage to stop doing what you were doing to be able to engage in the work?
That's a great question. And I didn't know the answer to that for a long time. So I was sober about 4 years, or I think like 4 years into the program. We had a family, and I didn't have a chance to go into this story, but we had a family reunion. It was a nightmare. My parents were just awful, and I couldn't deal with it. And the reunion was in Montana. And when the reunion got over with, I drove about 13 hours from Montana to Whidbey Island and listening to ACA talks, adult children of alcoholics. And it was what it really is it's adult children of people in dysfunctional families. And that was really my introduction, because my wife had told me I would really get a lot out of that program. But I wouldn't listen. But I was like, yeah, well, I'm already in 3 programs. I can't, I don't have room. But anyway, so I got really involved in that program about 4 years ago. And that's still a meeting. I still do a meeting or 2 a week in ACA, and did a lot of work in there, written work, step work, about learning how to become my own loving parent, learning how to love myself, dealing with a lot of trauma issues that I couldn't really deal with them as well in some of the other programs. I mean, you deal with it all, but the ACA program really helped me. So.
No, that's very helpful. And I'll definitely put a link in the podcast show notes to ACA for anybody who's interested in looking into that. There will be a link to that website. You'll find it. And if that's something that would be helpful for you, do it. Thank you so much, Greg. Very early in your share, you talked about how you were introduced to sex, drugs, alcohol, all of those things in high school that kind of solved the trauma, the issues that you were feeling. I recently was speaking to a bunch of who I assume were normies and introducing some of the concepts of recovery to them. And kind of the way I led into it, I said, if you think that the people you are dealing with, if alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever it may be, is the problem, that's where you're wrong, because that's the solution to them. It's a crappy solution, but it's a solution. It helps me escape those things that I'm trying to escape. Talk to us a little bit more about that problem versus solution and how you overcame, or maybe not overcame, how you address the problems in your life now with more healthy outlets.
Well, I think one thing that helped was to reconnect with a church. That helped a lot. That's been really good for me and been good for my family. It helped me to understand that all of those things were really a desire to feel good and to feel connected to God, really. I mean, that's what really they all were, was I was in pain. I was looking for something to take me out of that pain. And it was alcohol, it's pills, it was, relationships. It was all of that. And at the end of the day, none of that was fulfilling. None of that, it all ended up being very empty and a very hollow feeling and a very lonely feeling and a very, it's just a big lie that you tell yourself, that you convince yourself of, that this is what you want and this is what, how life works. And I think what the great thing about the recovery journey, the long, strange trip, is that you go through all kinds of trips, trying to find what it is that you really want to do, what really makes you happy. And exercise has helped, jogging has helped, fitness classes helped, coaching has always been a great thing for me. Basketball has always been wonderful. Friendships, meditation, church, those are all things that now are just way more appealing and more of a draw than alcohol and things like that. Like, that just doesn't even sound appealing, because that's not really where I'm at now. Now, I could go back there, but I certainly don't want to, and I just don't have any interest. I really want to be happy. I want to feel good. And I want to be a good person. I want to be a good dad and a good husband and a good teacher and a good coach and all these things, a good member of society, because it really feels good to do those things for me now. Where before I had really, I was just more interested in what I wanted right now. So it's a long trip and it takes time, it just takes time of just plugging along. But it does work. It works if you work it, as they say in the program.
Yeah, love it. Greg, I want to go into your journey with higher power. I mean, you talked about being raised in church, going to religious education, all of these things, and yet connecting to a higher power was really hard for you. So your sponsor basically became your higher power. Has that evolved from sponsor being higher power to something else being higher power, and how?
Yeah, I think at first he was my higher power because he was really like, I needed someone to just give me guidance and help me. And he was so perfect because he didn't come at me with a hard edge, with an authoritarian type. He knew me, and he knew when to be funny and how to kind of send me funny comedy clips or whatever to make me laugh, when he felt like I was maybe taking life too serious. But he also was there for me if I was not doing what I needed to be doing, step work and things like that. And then, that was temporary. And then I got kind of more and more into the program being my higher power. recovery being my higher power. And then I think that I still had this big God hole inside of me. And this summer was really when I got into reconnecting with the church. There was a kid that I had coached who I was very close with him and his family, and I was working with him. And he's very religious. His family's very religious. And he really liked me. But he kept saying to me, you really got to go to church. You got to come to my church. And he could just tell that I didn't have a connection to a church and a faith, really, you know? And he convinced me to go, and they had a family thing, and I have a 7-year-old, and there was a Bible study week or a kids thing, and then they had a really great pastor who was really great, who talked to me about faith, and so it was like going to AA for the first time. It was like going to any recovery program for the first time. It was my way of step one, and being new and being willing. Being willing to take a look at that and take a look at how that's missing, and that there is a higher power that wants me to connect with, that I just needed to be willing to do it and willing to try.
It's a cool journey, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I look forward to seeing whatever continues to develop, because I think, at least for me, when I reconnected with faith, with higher power in a different way, other things continued to grow and flower from that point. So that's awesome. I love that. And I love how you said, when I went back to church, it was like a step one experience again. I don't got this. I can't do this. I got to have something more. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that you talked about that I found very interesting, and this is kind of jumping the rails here to the next topic, but you said I would find things to distract me from recovery. And that was when your sponsor said, you got to move out, walk away from that home where you're with your girlfriend and move into a room and do stuff differently. Man, talk about the power of eliminating those distractions from your life. I mean, that's pretty extreme. That's willing to do whatever it takes. So talk to us about that a little bit more.
Well, I was in a lot of pain. And I think I got to a point really where I really got to, because I had background with recovery and AA and all this stuff. And I knew I was at the point where my alcoholism was getting really bad. I was at that middle of the road solution where I was either going to become a full-fledged drunk drug addict, homeless. That's the road I was on. I was like there's nothing else for me now. Or I was going to do it for real, but I couldn't play the game anymore. I couldn't ride the rail. I couldn't ride the fence. I had to choose. And I think the way that I got to, and maybe this is a coaching background or basketball background, I was like, I don't care if I really felt like this. I don't care if my relationship doesn't work out, if my kids don't ever want that. I am going to get 100% into this program. And I'm going to trust that my life's going to get better, which is what they tell me. That they tell me, like, your life will get better if you will turn your life over and do this program and commit to it. Your life will get better. It's like, I'm going to, like, I didn't really think to myself, I'm never going to drink again, or I'm never going to use again. What I said was, I'm going to commit 100% into this program. And I wouldn't be committing if, when my sponsor said, you got to move out, I wouldn't do it. Because what would happen is I would work all day. I'd go home and I'd want to make dinner. I'd want to hang out. I'd want to watch a movie or watch TV, and now it's all of a sudden it's 9:00. I didn't go to a meeting, and now it's, another day went by. I didn't go to a meeting, and my wife doesn't need to go to a meeting. I do. I mean, she loved hanging out with me and stuff like that. But I had to be clear about, like, this is what I have to do. This is my priority in life. If I don't do this, it's number one. It has to be number one. And if I do it, everything else works out. And it gets easier. My life has gotten more in balance. I don't need to go to 5 meetings a day like I did. There was a time where I really would go to a couple of meetings every day, and it was everything. It was I was kind of a junkie on meetings and the recovery program. But I just had to, I had to do that. I had to follow instructions.
Hey, Rico 12 Spearheads. If our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Rico 12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at rico12.com/support, or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Rico 12 Spearhead.
Yeah, and that's powerful. Thanks for sharing your willingness to do that and kind of the story behind it. Very good stuff. Next question comes from the same person who asked that first question about the trauma, dealing with that. I'm going to read this. I put it in the chat also. This person says, I tried ACA and I loved it, but what I found was it was very painful and I used more. The battle I'm having is getting sober to be able to face all that stuff. I'm so exhausted trying to survive life that I haven't even had the energy to pick up the pen. And I don't know how I have the capacity to attend all these meetings, etc. Where did your energy and strength come from in those moments of overwhelm?
Oh, it's overwhelming. And I've had a lot of history with depression, and real battles. Real battles during COVID, real battles in sobriety with depression. And it's a daily thing for me that it's not, hey, I have good and bad days. And, I just think the key is to just keep doing the next indicated thing. Keep doing the next best thing that you think you should do for your recovery. And therapy has helped me. I've had some really good therapists. Sometimes you can find a therapist that helps you along the way with some of these issues. You find something that's a top line type behavior, that's something that makes you feel good about yourself, whether it's walking or exercise, that can help. I've been to treatment a couple of times. And sometimes you can go, if you have a lot of trauma issues, there's a place called the Meadows where you can go for just a week and do childhood trauma. They have it's like 1 week, and it's great. I mean, so there's just keep doing the next indicated thing, and don't give up. Don't quit before the miracle. I know it's a cliche. I know people say it over and over. We get tired of these phrases, but they're really true. And you just keep doing the next indicated thing and don't give up, and it will get better. You will find your way through it.
Yeah, I really enjoy how you're addressing these things, Greg. You're being real about it, sharing your own experience there. There's something that I have experienced in my life when I'm at a place where I just can't do whatever I think the next indicated thing is. And as I look at those moments in hindsight, for whatever reason, however I was able to do it, come through it sober, and the light shined a couple days later, as I look at it, I see myself curled up in the corner, figuratively, of my room, and just turning my head and looking up towards God, towards higher power, and saying, God, this is all I have today, is just to curl up here in the corner. This is all I've got, but I'm giving all I've got to you. And that's everything I've got. Carry me through this day. And that has been really helpful to have that image in my mind. That's all I've got. And yet I'm still accepted by my higher power when I say that. That's all I've got today, but I'm giving it all to you. And it's carried me through. Do you have any other thoughts on that before we start wrapping things up here, Greg?
Oh, that's great. That's really good. And I have curled up in many a corner. You know, yeah, that I tell you, that first year of sobriety, you know, curling up into my bed was probably the number one meeting I did. It's just, it was so painful. I felt like I had lost everything. And the other, you know, I'm a day at a time person. And one thing I heard recently that I've been saying a lot to myself that a lady said, I heard a lady say in a meeting, is that she had written down on a piece of paper, this is God, and I'm going to handle all of your problems today. You know, turn your will. You don't have to worry. Turn your, you know, hey, I think she said her name, like, hey, dear so-and-so, dear Carrie, this is God. I'm going to handle all your problems. You know, turn your life over. I'm going to handle your problems today. That doesn't mean I don't have to do anything. I don't have to show up. It doesn't mean I don't have to pay my bills and the bills will be magically paid. But it's a way of mentally turning my will and my life, my concerns over to a higher power that really helps me, that takes me out of panic and stress and anxiety to, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the best I can. And that's the best I'm going to do the best I can.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Before we wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom, Greg?
Oh, just, you know, stay connected. The opposite of addiction is connection. So try to stay connected best you can. And life really does get better, and it gets better than you can possibly imagine if you stick around, because it's a wonderful journey. And that's it.
Love it. Thank you so much, Greg, for an amazing RICO 12 speaker meeting. If you haven't yet done so if we missed your question, or if you have other questions or would like to connect with Greg, are you okay if they email me and I send them to you via email?
Oh, yeah.
If they would like to connect with you? Perfect.
Sure.
If you'd like to connect with him, send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. That's RECO12POD@gmail.com. I'll get you connected with Greg or any of our past speakers if you'd like to connect with them. If you haven't already done so yet, please consider going to rate and review RICO 12 on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to it. It's a great way to work Step 12 and share this message with others who may not know where to find what they're searching for. Come back next week for another great speaker and a Q&A session with Eva J. She's another first-time RICO 12 speaker, and I'm looking forward to her talk next week. We continue to schedule speakers out a few months, looking into January and February of next year. If you would like to speak on RICO 12, send me an email, rico12pod@gmail.com. I'll get you lined up for one of those weeks there. Let's see. I think that's about it. Let's close out here with the Step 3 prayer that Greg's going to say for us. Go ahead, Greg.
There's an NA prayer that they say at the end of a meeting that I always love, that is kind of a third step prayer about take my will in my life. And I'm just going to close with that one. God, take my will in my life. Guide me in my recovery. Show me how to live clean.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you, Greg. Everybody remember, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down, and let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake, and he knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. So he reached for the needle to numb the pain inside, and the truth that he yearned for shriveled up and died. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle, rose with the rain. The ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake, and he knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth as he read from the book, only truth spilled out. So he reached for a power to help him through the night, 'cause what lives in the darkness dies in the light. Yeah, what lives in the darkness dies